Hello everyone, welcome to the Yissel Missile Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissel, and today we are doing part 14 in our deep dive series into Ed Leedskalnin and his Coral Castle. We have a chapter to read today from The Energy Grid by Cathie. We started this one a few weeks ago, and there's a lot of math, a lot of math in this. But yeah, we will begin today with chapter 3, the unified equations. So this is going to be very content heavy, but this is research that goes directly in line with the possible technology that Ed used when he built Coral Castle. So as always, I will be playing our slideshow here. There we go. And looking at all these pictures, it makes me want to go back and visit again. Maybe I will one day. Okay, so let's begin. Chapter 3, the unified equations. Space travel, thanks to the American and Russian rocket programs, is a reality. By using great masses of hardware, miles of wiring and plumbing, Newton's law of motion, and some not inconsiderable beginner's luck, the first man on the moon has stepped out of the pages of Jules Verne into history. Now, again, just because we're reading from this book doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with everything that's in this book. There's already many things on here that I just read that I don't agree with. I believe the space race was a political stunt and brought to you by Hollywood. Let's continue. Probes have been sent out to study Venus and Mars at close quarters. Considering the brief time in which man has taken serious notice of ways to bridge the gap between Earth and sky, these are remarkable achievements. So I also want to mention that during the same time I was visiting Florida and went to Coral Castle, I also went to NASA. And NASA has its own, I guess you would call it a Disneyland, because that's what it appeared to me as, where they charge admission to go on rides. They have displays of all of the tech that they apparently use to get into space. But when a lot of this stuff is foil wrapped around a vehicle that's supposed to go through our atmosphere, not only the Van Allen radiation belt, everybody should have been cooked passing through that. All right. Anyways, during the 1939 to 45 war, German scientists were carrying out experiments in rocketry. Their experiences gained in directing doodlebugs towards London made them the leaders in this field. Werner von Braun and other German experts subsequently passed on their knowledge and experience to others on both sides of the Iron Curtain. So you know what? I also want to mention something about this as well. We are told that we defeated Germany in World War II, but we took all of their military, all their top generals, all their scientists, and we incorporated them into the United States of America. So how is that really defeating an enemy, so to speak, when you're giving these people jobs instead of doing what the mainstream media was saying, which is put them in prison for life? I don't know, but that didn't happen, did it? So I have a lot of questions about this time frame in our history, because obviously it was written by us, by our country here. There's a lot of questions I have, and I think it's a lifelong journey of unraveling the truth in that topic. But anyways, those Model Ts of rocketry, the V2s, have given rise to the sophisticated Apollo and Vostok power units, which thrust comparatively tiny payloads into the void of space. They work, and they have enabled man to venture far away from his own planet. Yeah, again, I don't count on that. Yet, before the first space vehicle built on this planet thrust its snout beyond the ultimate atom of air in the envelope of which clings as a life-sustaining wrapper around our planet, the method was already out of date. It may have been out of date centuries ago. As a means of propulsion, rockets are obsolete. As obsolete as a propulsion method as the slingshot is out of date as a weapon. In both cases, brute force is the criterion. In both cases, the law of diminishing returns rules the game. As the power of the prime mover is increased, the size and cost of the system becomes less and less practicable. And the payload must eventually fail to give sufficient returns in relation to the effort expended in moving it through space. A rocket allowed mankind to take the first essential step, but it is obvious if we stop to think about it that rocket propulsion cannot be the answer to exploration of star systems that surround our galaxy. Yeah. And I believe it's a lot smaller than we're told. So, even if we could eventually achieve speeds approaching that of light itself, we could never hope to venture far from the solar system in one lifetime. The distances are vast. Rockets the size of small cities would be necessary so that several generations could live out their lives during the journey through space in order that there could be colonists for the far planet destinations. Again, another pipe dream here. It might be possible to do this. It would not be very practicable. As a theme for science fiction writers, it has been a bountiful source of stories. The first glimmerings of how true space travel might be achieved came to me when I uncovered the first clues that led me to the UFO grid which laces about our globe. See, tangible evidence here. This is what we're talking about today. I published my findings and hoped that someone with greater scientific knowledge than I possess would carry on from this point and finally discover every secret locked into the system. I was aware that my calculations were not precisely accurate in the strict mathematical sense, but I could see that the system was based on time-space geometrics, and at least there was the best possible support for this nonetheless than the theories of Einstein. Somewhere I knew the system contained a clue to the truth of the unified field which, he has postulated, permeates all of existence. I didn't know at the time that this clue had already been found by scientists who were well ahead of me in the play. I know now that they must have understood something of the grid system years ago. They knew that Einstein's ideas about the unified field were correct. What's more, for many years they have been carrying out full-scale research into the practical applications of the mathematical concept contained in that theory. I believe, with good reason, that the full facts have been known to at least some scientists for many years. The very fact that man-made scientific equipment has been built into the UFO grid system, which I put forward as a theory years ago, is evidence that at least some people had prior knowledge of the grid and its workings. It must have taken them years to build up the network of stations which now exist. But as far as they or their masters are concerned, it is not our right to know. The only way to traverse the vast distances of space is to possess the means of manipulating or altering the very structure of space itself, altering the time-space geometric matrix, which to us provides the illusion of form and distance. The method of achieving this lies in the alteration of frequencies controlling the matter-antimatter cycles which govern our awareness or perception of position in the time-space structure. Time itself is a geometric, just as Einstein postulated. If time can be altered, then the whole universe is waiting for us to come and explore its nooks and crannies. In the blink of an eye, we could cross colossal distances. For distance is an illusion. The only thing keeping places apart in space is time. If it were possible to move from one position to another in space in an infinitely small amount of time, or zero time, then both the positions would coexist according to our awareness. By speeding up the geometric of time, we will be able to bring distant places within close proximity. This is the secret of UFOs. They travel by means of altering the spatial dimensions around them and repositioning in time-space. When I had completed my first book, I was not aware of just how close I had come to this truth. The answer was literally staring at me from the pages of my own work for nearly 3 years before a visit from a stranger brought it into my grasp. A year after the book was published, I had a telephone call from a man who had just arrived in New Zealand from England. He explained that he was a textile salesman and he would be here for only a few days on business. He said he had heard of my research and was most insistent that he should see me. He said that he had very little knowledge of UFOs, but that he would like to talk to me about my theories. Could he come out to my home for a visit? On that particular evening, I was busy with some affairs of my own. I wasn't anxious to entertain a stranger, but in the end I agreed to see him. He arrived in a rented car and at once began questioning me about my activities and my research. It was soon obvious that he knew a great deal more about the subject of UFOs than he was prepared to admit, and he was quite demanding about getting his questions answered. He had an air of nervous tension about him as he checked through pages of my calculations. Then he wanted to know where I kept all of my data, and if there were many people who knew about my studies. I make no secret of whatever findings I turn up, and I showed him everything he asked to see. Finally, he insisted that there was something I hadn't shown him, an equation which knitted all of my calculations together. In some surprise, I told him I knew of no such equation. His expression was eloquent of disbelief. As this discussion proceeded, I informed him that there were probably others who thought as he did, that I had some such equation up my sleeve, because I was being watched, and on several occasions my car had been followed. I added that since he had come to my home, he would most likely have unwanted company on his way back into the city. Whoever it was that was keeping an eye on me, I told him, would probably believe him to be a contact man from abroad, and would therefore be interested in his movements. I must admit that I told him this intriguing little tale to see what his reaction might be. I was fascinated to see his apparent nervousness become increased, and in some agitation he decided it was time to leave. His departure was hurried. I've neither seen him nor heard of him since. I wonder what year that occurred. For the next 2 or 3 days, I found myself going over and over his questions. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that the stranger had known far more about my calculations than I did myself. Was there something there which he could see, but which I had missed? If there was an equation buried somewhere in my figuring, then I would have to find it. Reworking the math, I finally decided to concentrate specifically on 3 harmonic values which appeared to have close relationship with one another. Previously, I had shown this connection and had truthfully pointed out that I did not know why the relationship was there at all. There were these harmonic values that now fully occupied my attention. 1703. This is the 4-figure harmonic of 170,300,000,000, which is the expression in cubic minutes of arc of the mass or volume of the planet Earth and its surrounding atmosphere. 1439. A 4-figure harmonic of 143,900 minutes of arc per grid second, representing the speed of light in grid values. 2640. This figure, expressed in minutes of arc volumes, is built into the polar portion of the grid structure as a geometric coordinate. Now I found that when I matched these values harmonically, the results were as follows. Zeros to the right-hand side can be ignored in this form of harmonic calculation. 1703 minus 264 over 1439 equals 1439. In other words, the difference between the harmonic of mass and the harmonic of light is the harmonic of 264, or 2640. It was now apparent that if any calculations were more accurately worked out, it it should be possible to find out just what the 2640 figure referred to. After several hours of work, the following was what looked up at me from my paper. 17025 Earth mass harmonic minus 2636 unknown harmonic equals 14389. Checking through the 5-figure mathematical tables, I found, to my surprise, that 2.6363 is the square root of 6.95 from the 1 to 10 square root tables. In harmonic calculations of this kind, decimal points as well as zeros to the right of a figure can be ignored. So it could be said that the square root of 695 was 2636. Now I could perceive the first steps necessary to solving the elusive equation. I had long established that 695 is the harmonic reciprocal of the speed of light, or 1 of 1439. It's showing it as a fraction. The calculations were now sufficiently accurate for algebraic values to be substituted, although obviously a computer would be necessary to solve the true values to extreme accuracy. So, 17025 Earth mass minus 2636 square root of speed of light reciprocal equals 14389. 14389, the speed of light. If c equals the speed of light and m equals mass, then c plus the square root of 1 over c equals m. And I'll just show that. Now at last, I had the first part of a unified field equation in harmonic values. To take the step further, I had to go back to where there was the Einsteinian theory, particularly the famous equation E equals mc squared, where E is energy, m is mass, and c is the speed of light. Einstein declared that physical matter was nothing more than a concentrated field of force. What we term physical substance is in reality an intangible concentration of waveforms. Different combinations and structural patterns of waves unite to form the myriads of chemicals and elements which in turn react with one another to form physical substances. Different waveforms of matter appear to us to be solid because we are constituted of similar waveforms which resonate within a clearly defined range of frequencies and which control the physical processes of our limited world. Einstein believed that m, the value for mass in the equation, could eventually be removed and a value substituted that would express the physical in the form of pure energy. In other words, by substituting for m, a unified field equation should result, which would express in mathematical terms the whole of existence, this universe and everything within it. As I have already said, it seems that before his death, Einstein did indeed produce this equation. What the mathematical terms were which he used, I do not know, but I couldn't help wondering what results I might get if I were to tackle the problem from the point of harmonic math. If an equation could be found which had a harmonic affinity with all substance, one which showed a resonance factor tuned to matter itself, then the problem perhaps would be solved. Einstein maintained that the m in his equation could be replaced by a term denoting waveform. I had now found a substitute for m in terms of waveform of light. So the obvious step to me was to replace Einstein's m with the values of c found from the UFO grid. These are the results I obtained. And I'm just going to show it here. I now had before me a harmonic unified field equation expressed in terms of light, or pure electromagnetic waveform, a key to the universe, the whole existence, to the seen and the unseen, to form solids, liquids, gases, the stars, and the blackness of space itself, all consisting of visible and invisible waves of light. All of creation is light. That was the answer that had been right within my grasp for 4 years. Now it was necessary to check the validity of the equation. To accomplish this, I needed a computer and the help of an expert in pure mathematics. A young man who had attended one of my lectures said he was willing to put a small computer at my service, and a friend of his, an excellent mathematician who had a larger computer, was willing to program it harmonically to give me assistance should I need it. I was deeply appreciative of both offers, and the subsequent calculations proved the initial equation to be valid. Throughout all of my research, I have always been at the limits of my known knowledge, forever frustrated by my slow rate of progress. I could always see much further ahead than my technical ability would allow me to travel. And I can relate to that, Bruce. In my earlier publications, I had stated that I believed that the value of 2545.58, the geometric distance in minutes of arc, from the grid poles to the main corner aerial positions in the grid polar squares, was a harmonic of gravity acceleration. I am now aware that this assumption was incorrect, and that the true value for the harmonic of gravity acceleration is derived from the speed of light. The diagonal of the polar square of 5091.168825 units can be broken down into a series of values. And instead of reading off all the numbers, I'm just going to show this equation on screen here. My apologies for this not focusing right away. This is what the Logitech camera does. There we go. I'll read it out too for those listening. 5091.168824 divided by 2 equals 2545.584412, and 2545.584412 squared equals 648.0000. The number 648 is a harmonic factor of great importance, as will be demonstrated in other sections of this book. The many other harmonic factors centered around the polar square corner aerial positions form a series of complex mathematical associations, and this can be left for those who wish to carry out their own research. The reciprocal of 2545.58, rounded off to four-figure accuracy, was given as a harmonic of 3930, now corrected to 3928371. When I made my initial discovery of the unified equations, the harmonic of 3930 was thought to be that of anti-gravity. It is now known that this value is related to the Earth's magnetic field. Although I labeled them wrongly, the actual values have stood the test of time and still fit into the equations as originally demonstrated. The harmonic equations are those from which an atomic bomb is developed. By setting up derivatives of the equation in geometric form, the relative motions of the waveforms inherent in the matter are zeroed and convert from material substance back into pure energy. By reversing the process, physical substance in any desired shape or form could be produced from pure energy. While practical applications of the latter possibility may still be far in the future, we are nevertheless at least capable of now destroying matter. As I have stated elsewhere, scientists can make a bang from a bomb, but as yet they are still unable to get the bang back into the bottle. Although I was much happier with progress when I arrived at this point in my calculations, there were still some important answers missing. As far as they went, equations explained the workings of a nuclear explosive device, but they still had not yielded the secrets of UFO propulsion. Wow, I think he's trying to say that UFOs use explosive energy that they could make it fold back into itself. So like an atomic bomb that can then go unexplode. And they harness all that energy into their ship. Something like that. That's what I'm guessing. The UFO grid was undoubtedly constructed on the basis of the equation. Yet a UFO does not disintegrate when it moves within the resonating fields of the system. There had to be an extension of the equations, which so far I had missed, that would produce the necessary harmonics for movement in space-time. But I felt close to the solution, and I was determined to find it. It has often been my experience that when a stalemate is reached, it is best to throw aside one's work for a time and take a rest. For the next few weeks, I deliberately forgot everything even remotely connected with UFOs. But one evening, unheralded and unexpected, a thought flashed into my mind. Why only deal with single values of C? The key was turned and a sequence of doors swung open, one after another, to reveal secrets of space and time. In the polar area of the UFO grid, the geometric values of some of the coordinates appear to be doubled up. The diagrams of the polar squares, as I have termed them, incorporate twice the value of 2545.56. In the resultant grid polar square, the speed of light reciprocal harmonic of 695 is incorporated in a harmonic of 2695. These coordinates are the same from corner aerial positions to the geographic poles. It appears that the factor 2 preceding the 695 serves to harmonically double the reciprocal of the speed of light. I reasoned that a way to check this idea was to increase the values of C in my equation and observe the changing harmonic of E. In a few hours, in pursuit of this line of thought, I was able to say, quote, "I have found something extremely interesting," end quote. It was apparent that one only had to double the value of C. Once I had done this, it was possible to produce two different equations through the use of tables relating to the square root portion of the equation. The results differed according to whether square roots 1 to 10 or 10 to 100 were employed. In equation number 1, I found that the resulting harmonic was 392.669171250. This was the value calculated by the computer after we had fed the equation in and gradually corrected from one side of the equation to the other. I was only too well aware that my calculations were only of, quote, near enough, end quote, accuracy up to this point, and had been sufficient only to form a general basis for the theories I had developed. Four-figure accuracy, in fact, is just not nearly good enough, as any pure scientist will be quick to agree. By feeding in the harmonics on either side of the equation and gradually correcting the 12-digit value was finally arrived at. This harmonic is not yet completely accurate. Larger computers will be necessary to carry on the correction to the ultimate of precision. Nevertheless, the result is now good enough as far as I am concerned, and it may at least start off a scientist of an independent nature to carry out further investigations of his own. I wonder if we could just put this into an AI generator and see what they come up with as far as equations. That'd be kind of interesting to see. I had shown previously that the four-figure harmonic of 3930 rounded off to four figures was the close reciprocal of 2545.58. In a practical sense, the values were near enough to demonstrate what I was trying to establish. Therefore, I considered that the harmonic of 392,699,17,1205, derived by doubling the C component of the equation, was also indicating a reciprocal of the 2545.58 value found in the grid polar square areas. With slight corrections to the equation, could now be expressed thus. And again, I'm just going to show you the equations because this goes over my head. And again, just give it a moment to focus. There we go. The second equation is derived by using the square root of the 10 to 100 tables. This equation is as follows. The double harmonic of the speed of light reciprocal equals that equation. The nearest we have brought to this accuracy using a small desk computer is as follows. So they only use, you hear that? It's only a small desk computer. So that's pretty interesting here. I'm sure we could input all of this into a modern computer and possibly get much faster and accurate results. Hopefully. So on the next page, he also has more equations here. And I think we're talking, what year is this? This edition was published in 1997. So whatever technology he used as a computer is concerned, a personal computer. Yeah, it's about time we re-input these equations into a modern computer, don't you say? I think that would be interesting to see. The speed of light harmonic accurate to four figures is equal to 1439, as I have said elsewhere. The value used in this calculation, according to the more accurate computer check, equals 1438881. As I have already stated, the true value will only be derived by the use of highly sophisticated computers. Again, we are there now, today. Another possible lead for mathematician readers is the fact that the neutral tangent of 36 degrees is 72654. The square of 26953 from the equation is 726504, which is very close. The fact that the harmonic of light has only to be doubled in order to obtain anti-light fields must be related to the matter and antimatter cycles of the physical and the non-physical worlds. If the two plus and minus fields are interlocked, as I have postulated, and matter and antimatter manifest in alternate pulses, then a double cycle must occur between each pulse of matter and antimatter. The antimatter pulse cannot be perceived by us for fairly obvious reasons. But then, when calculating the frequency interaction between the two, both cycles must be taken into account. By stepping up or slowing down the frequency of C between the two cycles, a shift in space-time must occur. And with that, that's the end of Chapter 3. So we are getting in the equations here. And you know what? Chapter 4 is really short. Could probably knock that out right now. Are you guys hanging in there? There's a lot of math. Okay, so chapter 4 is titled Further Evidence of the UFO Grid. So we're talking about the UFO grid because it pertains to the energy grid, which pertains to ley lines, which pertain to Coral Castle. And even though he's using calculations based on a different grid, then, I don't know how to explain it. Does this math account for curvature? I don't know. But as far as inputting these equations into a modern computer to get accurate numbers, I wonder if anybody's done that yet with his work here. Perhaps we could do that on a later deep dive here. Alright, we're just going to read chapter 4 because it's very short. There's an image of a handwritten note here. And, yeah, we'll end with chapter 4 today. So we'll read that, and then that'll be it. And next week we'll start chapter 5. Okay, so chapter 4, Further Evidence of the UFO Grid. And now to look at some evidence of the existence of the global grid, which is used by UFOs, either for propulsion, navigation, or both. In the early part of 1968, I was approached by a co-pilot of National Airways Corporation, Viscount. He had an interesting account for me. The previous day, he had been a crew member of a Viscount flying north to Auckland from Wellington. Between New Plymouth and Auckland, with the aircraft at 19,000 feet, a request was received from air traffic control to divert slightly starboard of track. Radar operators at Auckland Airport had 3 stationary objects on their screen, placed at intervals down the west coast between Raglan and New Plymouth. The Viscount was vectored towards these positions by radar control, and the crew was asked to scan the area to check whether the objects causing the radar blips were visible to the human eye. The maneuver was carried out accurately, but there was no sight of anything unusual in the sky. Although the presentation of the objects on the radar screen was clear and pronounced, the operators, in view of the crew's negative report, prepared to dismiss the incident, and suddenly the blips disappeared, disposing of the problem anyway. So they saw something on their radar that they couldn't see with their eyes. And then they disappeared and they just carried on. Until the next day, when I appeared in the radar room with my grid map under my arm. I discussed the incident with the radar crew, and one of them then plotted the positions of the 3 unknown objects on the radar map on the display board. When these positions were compared with my grid map, it was immediately apparent that the UFOs were spaced along one of the north-south grid lines running down the coast, and that the intervals between the UFOs were 30 nautical miles and 15 nautical miles, a spacing that coincided with track lines running east-west on the grid. So I'd like to point something out here. He's talking about straight line grids. But if he's using calculations in mathematics that represent this model, then he's encountering errors. But he clearly sees that there's grids that run east to west and north to south for miles and miles and miles. Much longer than what it would be if there were curvature to this. Okay? You can't get completely straight lines on this thing. it would have to start wrapping around at some point, and it does not. And he is clearly saying that. So there's cognitive dissonance going on with Brucey here. Oh boy. Alright, I won't go much further into that for now. Clearly our visitors were active again. Some project was in progress on the section of the system occupying their attention when they had been disturbed by the approach of the Viscount. Recently I've been able to correlate this particular incident with other human activity off the coast of New Zealand, which strongly suggests that our close-lipped scientists are not only aware of the actual existence of alien visitors, but are indeed working in close cooperation with them. We shall enlarge upon this point later. You see this? Scientists are being hush-hush. Because I probably don't want to get killed, right? By now, my old original grid map, which I completed in 1965, is showing signs of wear and tear. But it still helps me to prove to anyone interested that the grid is no myth, not something I have just dreamed up in order to confuse an already baffled public. I could not possibly have predicted the positions of those 3 blips seen on an airport radar screen long before they actually made their appearance. Yet, unless the grid map is in fact accurate and reliable, that is the only alternative explanation. At least one of my critics has dismissed my work with an amusingly contemptuous quote, "Oh well, you can prove anything by numbers," end quote. See, that dismissive attitude, I don't like that. But a lot of people are like that, apparently. Unfortunately, I guess I should say. Forecasting the future by numbers and lines may or may not be possible, but I have neither the training, knowledge, nor understanding to attempt that sort of thing. I'm pretty sure I don't possess second sight. More's the pity. Another incident which occurred later in 1968 was one that startled the flying fraternity. The RNZAF was in on this one. But as happens with air forces in other parts of the world, the authorities quickly hushed the matter up. The lid was slammed down tightly on Pandora's box, which must be pretty full by now. It manages to fly open with increasing regularity, much to the anguish of those who would like to have the whole business of UFOs thought of by the public as a modern fairy tale. An Air Force Orion was carrying out a routine exercise mission off the west coast of New Zealand's North Island one cloudy afternoon. When the crew was alerted by radar control, an unidentified object was traveling at the leisurely pace of about 40 knots from north to south, some 30 miles off the coast. The Orion was requested to check on this intruder and was vectored onto an intercept course. Approaching closer to the object, the Orion's forward-seeking radar locked onto the visitor, but there was no solid object visible to anyone on board. According to my information, the object then lost altitude, and the Orion followed it down. The crew then reported that a whirlpool-like eddy was visible on the surface of the sea. Perhaps the object, whatever it was, had dived into the ocean and escaped in submarine fashion. This, you may be sure, will not be the last time that UFOs will be tracked by radar in our skies. About once a month I am approached by an aircrew member and am informed of yet another UFO sighting in the New Zealand area. If all these crew members are crazy, then our airlines are a fairly precarious means of travel for the unsuspecting public. Why is it that none of the reports that reach me are printed in the newspapers? The answer is this: the newspapers never receive them. Aircrew members are, on the whole, a conservative breed, and they jealously guard their image as a sane and level-headed group dedicated only to the task of flying in a, quote, safe and expeditious manner, unquote, as it is termed in the Code of Regulations. So far, I have been one of the few foolish people in commercial flying to stick my neck out and make public what I have seen, theorized, and heard. Perhaps in the near future, others in my profession will come forward and give support to my statements. There are many who believe, as I do, that the truth is more important than most of the artificial criteria with which we burden ourselves in this so-called civilized society of ours. Some evergreen truth right there. Nuclear tests are still with us and provide a perfect check on the harmonic calculations which I described previously. The French were active at Mururoa Island again in 1968 and gave me a further opportunity to make some predictions on the possible dates on which a nuclear device could be exploded. Mostly for my own satisfaction, I spent one evening calculating all the possible combinations and harmonic values necessary for the detonation of a nuclear bomb to cover the whole of the testing period. I was quite aware that I had not yet discovered all of the harmonics involved, but by carrying out constant checks on the activities of the scientists involved, I hoped that in some time most of the secrets would eventually be revealed. I doubt if many of the boffins will welcome my constant snooping. But I believe that if the public is under a constant threat of annihilation, they at least have the right to know how the mechanics of the operation will be carried out. The more knowledge we have, the better our chances of stopping these idiots from blasting our planet to eternity. A few weeks after I tucked away my calculations, I was invited to present a lecture on UFOs to the Royal Aeronautics Society in Auckland. Just before the lecture, I was taken out to dinner by the president and the secretary of the society. Over the meal, conversation turned to my theories regarding the nuclear bomb tests. Not altogether unnaturally, the president was inclined to be skeptical of my methods of calculation, and he asked me quite casually when the next French bomb would be detonated. I told him that the 25th of the month, about a fortnight away, was my bet. The talk then switched to more mundane matters. So Bruce was predicting when a nuclear bomb might go off. So there's future predictions here that come along with these mathematical equations. That's what it sounds like. The lecture presented to a capacity audience was well received and the bomb discussion forgotten. On the 25th of the month, the peace of Mururoa Island was shattered, and the echoes of the French nuclear explosion rippled around the world. It was another personal victory for me to chalk up. That afternoon, my telephone rang. It was the president of the Royal Aeronautics Society. I would come into the city for a chat, and could I give further test dates to cover the rest of the current French series? This I did. The dates I supplied proved to be correct, culminating in the explosion of France's hydrogen bomb. Further tests were canceled when the President de Gaulle found that the French bankers were having a lean year. Oh, the bankers needed to call off the nuclear bombs. How convenient. It was a choice between bread and bombs, and bread won. So the banks were in trouble, so the bomb time went bye-bye. Ain't that funny? I had proved my point that the dates of nuclear tests could be accurately predicted on the basis of harmonic calculations. The president of the society, who is also the head of a government department, gave me a copy of notes he had made on some of my predictions. He told me that these had been passed on to the heads of other government departments. This memo is shown in photocopy number 1. It shows that my prediction for the hydrogen bomb test was very close. For the moment, I was quite satisfied with this very small error. I would have been satisfied had I been several hours out. Newsweek magazine reported, quote, drilling for future nuclear tests. Last week's underground test of an advanced nuclear weapon at Pahut Mesa, north of Las Vegas, foreshadows even bigger blasts. The Atomic Energy Commission has drilled several cased holes a mile deep in central Nevada, 100 miles north of the present test site. It has let further contracts for construction of 4 test holes to a depth of 6,000 feet on Amchitka, Amchitka, the fourth island from the end of the Aleutian chain, and that's spelled Aleutin. These holes take a year and a half to drill and mine out at the bottom. In essence, the AEC is stockpiling holes in the ground against future test requirements. They're drilling 6,000 feet into the ground. It takes them a year and a half to do it. So here's a photocopy of atom bomb predictions. It says, photocopy of predictions of atom tests to be carried out by French scientists at Mururoa Island in the Pacific in 1968, handwritten and predated by the head of a government department in Auckland City, New Zealand. The actual time shown is that of the hydrogen bomb. It was informed that this note was passed on to 4 other government departments before the test date. This is interesting. This says, Captain Cathie predictions French atomic bomb tech. Explosion can only occur at the following approximate times within an hour of time or 2. 1968 September at 8:22:50. The actual was 8:19:00. And then the same let's see here. I guess it was the same time frame of 1968 September, 23:15:50, 28:21:00, and then in October, 6:15:15. If any explosions, nuclear bombs between above dates, they must occur on one or more of them. So I just read all of his handwritten note. You tell me, I read that pretty dang good there. I got pretty much every word right off of that. Now, these times over here on the far right, I did not read out loud. And really, I can't read it. There's a stamp over one of them. But that's fine. All right, we got one page left. Hey, Jason, good to see you. See you in the chat. Recent computer lists of the geometric positions of many atomic tests carried out at the Nevada test site show that a great number of them have been detonated on positions which straddle a latitude of 37.11 1195 degrees north. This would create a reciprocal harmonic of 2694, an average value related to the unified equations discovered in my research. In my earlier publications, I indicated that a mass value was possibly utilized for the Aleutian Island tests. Now that I have computers to work with, I believe that a more accurate set of values can be demonstrated, which would allow the geometric harmonics required for successful detonation to be fulfilled. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what he means by this. How is he predicting when a bomb would detonate based off of the harmonics? I think I have an idea of what he's trying to say, but I can't articulate it right now. In my earlier publications, I indicated that a mass value was possibly utilized for the Aleutian Island tests. Now that I have computers to work with, I believe that a more accurate set of values can be demonstrated, which would allow the geometric harmonics required for successful detonation to be fulfilled. A position of 51 degrees, 25 feet, 10.85 inches north, and 179 degrees, 24 feet, 00 inches east on the southeast end of the island would be ideal as a test site. If I'm reading that wrong, I'm sorry, that's just how it is. I'm not sure. The representation of some of these numbers I'm probably going to get incorrect from time to time, so just please bear with me. The great circle distance from this point to longitude 180 degrees at the same latitude is 1347 seconds of arc, which is a half harmonic of 2694, the average value derived from the unified equations. The circumference of the parallel latitude at 51 degrees, 25 feet, 10.85 inches is 13470 minutes of arc, or nautical miles, relative to the equator. This again is a half harmonic of 2694, the unified equation. Other harmonics which are associated with this position and grid pole B in the north have connections with gravitation. This will be explained more fully in later works. For interest, the test site of Bikini Island and Eniwetok, and that's spelled Eniwetok, Eniwetok. Are 11 degrees and 35 feet north latitude, which equals 695 minutes of arc. This figure 695 is the harmonic of the speed of light reciprocal, or 1 over 1439. Johnson Island is 169.5 degrees west longitude. Note: it has been discovered in later research that the speed of light is not a constant over the Earth's surface. It varies in relation to gravity acceleration. This in turn causes a slight variation of the values derived from the unified equations. This will be more fully explained in future publications. So it's like he takes 2 steps forward and 1 step back, because I think we're dealing with density and mass, and he's leaving those out of the equation. So with that, that is the end of Chapter 4. So we read Chapters 3 and 4 today. Chapter 5 is The Mysterious Aerials. I hope you all enjoyed that. So 5 and 6 we will do next week. That's going to be a doozy. That's going to be about 20 pages. But there's also a few grids in here to show. Grids laid over maps. But chapter 5, what we're going to start off with next week, is fully text. But that's only 7 pages. And with that, we close the book. So, I really think this guy has been basing all of his equations off of this model here. But when he goes into talking about these grids, the grids are straight lines. And he's trying to implement it onto this. And no matter how many times he has accounts of these grids, they are always straight lines. And that is what I don't understand with this. Along with a lot of the mathematics, because a lot of this goes over my head. And I can only read so many new words a day. So, that's going to be it for today. I hope you all appreciated this. We'll be back here next week, next Tuesday, 6:05 p.m. And we'll continue this reading of this book to get more understanding of how Ed built his coral castle. But talking all of these equations, it's hard to really wrap my head around the equations because I'm not sure where how do I put this all together on my own. So if any of you out there have a better way of explaining what Bruce is talking about in this book, please let me know here in the comments. And if you haven't already, please like this video, share it around. I'd appreciate it. This live stream will also get re-uploaded in the next couple of days, if not tomorrow. But yeah, make sure to check my description. I have a link to my eBay store in there. That's the only other source of income I currently have. So please check that out if you're interested in physical media or die-cast car collecting. But other than that, that's going to be it for today. I really appreciate y'all being here. And until the next one, class dismissed.